Hello and welcome back to the Handstandcast with me, Emmet Lewis, and my co-host, Mikael Christiansen. How is it going, Mikael?
Same shit as last time. Not much change.
Yeah. We just had a bit of a debrief before this call, so I know exactly how it is. And yeah, we're still in Rona, 905th of July. I think maybe we should end the podcast exactly when Rona finishes. That will be it. It'll be run from the Rona, because we started just about just when Rona was kicking off, and then we should end it. It could just be like a Rona-induced fever dream of someone.
Yeah, or maybe we just maybe it's a prophecy. Maybe this is the last episode, and then just Rona ends. I mean, everyone would just tell us, you guys shut the fuck up. If there was a correlation between those two things, we'd be shutting the fuck up right now.
Yeah, maybe. It's a good idea. Anyway, where are we going to go to? Do I have any news? I don't think I have any news. Actually, I do have news. There will be no more seagulls in the background. If you ever notice the seagulls in the recording that appear in sometimes that we can't edit out, they will be gone. So I managed to find a new house to move to that has no seagulls. And junkies.
They have goats, don't they have?
We have goats, but the goat doesn't make any noise now.
That's true.
The sheep was making noise today. So one of the sheep was calling. We have some farm animals, by the way. Just drop that in. So one of the sheeps was calling for the other sheep, frantically, but they just walked around the side of the stables. So three of the sheep were in one corner. The other one was just on the other side. It was having a near panic attack because it couldn't see its friends, even though they were less than 3 meters around the corner from it. So sheep possibly don't have that kind of, object retention? It's the thing babies develop when something disappears out of sight, it's gone. So sheep, they're possibly as smart as your 1-year-old. To everyone who has a 1-year-old out there. Anyway, shall we get on with our...
Yeah, I guess so. As I said, I just don't have much to report other than I'm kind of bored at the end. I guess you all can relate with that. Huh?
How's that big ass origami going of yours?
The origami is actually going pretty well. I sorted out the large wings today, which was a huge success. I had to basically, I was the crease pattern isn't exactly the one that I want to do. So I just went in and did some adjustments to make it look more like the thing that I want to do with it. And that's actually pretty fun because suddenly you need to both be thinking kind of mathematically, which I'm not so good at when it comes to origami. But you also kind of need to think of the kind of shaping and the final product, which is what I am better at. But it was cool to just see, okay, I want the wings to be large in this way. And if the wings are going to be that large and I'm going to have the tail, I need to find some sort of solution. So I have no idea what the designer actually did because I have one single picture to look at. And that picture doesn't correlate with the pattern that I have. So I had to just find a way to make that work. And I think it worked. So I just have 9 gazillion hours left. It's a huge, thick mess of paper on the floor, but at least I can walk around my floor now. So that's
good.
At least a plus.
Are you able to bring coffee into your room yet? Or
yes, I've brought coffee in every single time. But that's also the thing. I knew I was going to color the model, and I've colored it in a kind of brownish palette. Yeah, the palette is actually brownish.
Coincidentally, you have colored it in a coffee colored. Coincidentally,
it is coincidental because it is King Ghidorah from the Godzilla franchise, and he's kind of yellowish brown, and he's going to look cooler than that fucking puppet figure in the movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is that. The end. So what's our topic for tonight?
Our topic today is we are going to talk about what is considered the forbidden direction in handstands. Ooh, should have kept this for Halloween. Or the one that's kind of less done and considered very bad, but should be explored. And we're going to talk about twisting and rotating and all these kind of things that sometimes have a negative connotation, I suppose, because we like to keep our handstands very straight and very we only bend in 2 planes and all this. But I think twisting opens up a very interesting kind of plane of movement that is worth exploring more so.
Certainly does.
Yeah, I think it's one of these things that we tend to get caught up. I think, like, say the way I coach handstands, the way I introduce skills is obviously we get a handstand, we assume we're at this level, and we get people kind of able to do some stuff. So we start moving the legs, and we start getting control of that. And then we start moving the waist. And what I mean by that is once we can move the legs at a certain point, then we have the ability to flex and extend the torso, which is obviously pressing and Mexicans. And then we also have flagging, which is the lateral flexing and extending of the spine. But no one, I'm not going to say no one, but it's kind of one of those things that it's considered bad.
Less common.
Less common of rotating through the waist and twisting through the waist. And while it's kind of one of its things that can pose a problem, one of these things, it's also one of these things that it can lead to some very interesting, funky stuff. And you see it, people exploring it every now and then. And I can remember, do you remember this act? It was in the Man, I don't know, probably about Cirque du Mans, sorry, explain that for non-circus people. It's a big circus festival in Paris showcasing Circus of Tomorrow or Circus of Today or something like that. And they're always looking for contemporary sort of stuff. But there was a contortionist act who was from Ukraine, I think, and she was doing a lot of things of rotating through the shoulders to a hands crossed handstand and rotating on the heels of her hand and doing handstands from a normal position, but then turning so her fingers would be on the same line.
Maybe it's that girl in the white costume. Can't remember her name.
No,
I know that Sergei Timofeyev did that.
Yeah, it would have been before
twisty
him.
stuff.
I think it would have been the thing that started him getting into it. Or
yeah, I'm not sure who that is. But yeah, like there are. I mean, I can think of several people that did a lot of kind of twisty stuff. And like what I like with the twisting is that it both poses a problem and kind of opportunity. So there's loads of shapes that just directly require twisting, such as a figa or like just like kind of a twisted flag. Like all these things require some sort of rotation in the pelvis or in the spine and so on. And you have a bunch of different places to rotate in the same way that you have a different places to flex and extend the body as well. Like in terms of like if you arch or if you pike, you can simply bend you can bend the knees and bring your weight backwards, for example. Then you can bend the knees and kind of start extending the hips as well to bring yourself further and so on and so on. And in the rotational axis, you have the hips, you have the spine, you have the kind of like all the way through the spine, and you have the kind of upper part of the rib cage, and the shoulders themselves can turn and so on. So it offers a lot of offers a lot of different places to control, and it's something that I really love to use this with like intermediate to advanced practitioners, just getting people to twist a lot. Like often give them like this kind of drill where it's like you start twisting the legs, and when the legs come to a stop, you continue with the hips, and when the hips come to a stop, you continue with kind of the spine, and in the end, like you just try to twist yourself so much that your shoulders literally shifts axis. So if your shoulders are kind of on like on the same line as your hands, you want them to kind of be completely twisted the other way, so that the line of the shoulders and the line of the hands form a cross in the end. And it's just like to challenge further the ability to stay stable, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's. Yeah, I remember you had me them many years ago when we were doing some coaching. They were kind of, interesting to kind of play with. It's kind of one of those things that like it does lead into. There's two ways to generate the twist, I suppose, in a two-arm handstand, and both of them have two different kind of things. You can generate it from the legs or from the hips and let it travel downwards, and that leads to kind of the one you were doing, that rotational control drill. And then you have the other one where you twist the shoulders and then it spirals upwards. And these are two things to try out, and they kind of generate two very different looks to the handstand almost, even though they kind of, even if you push them to the limit, they'll end up in the same place, give or take. But at the same time, they kind of, it looks very different visually in, it's always this kind of thing in handstands. We think static positions a lot of the time, but it's always the things that are, I suppose, more interesting in some ways is what happens between those static positions. That really defines it. And like the transition from the top down twist to the bottom up twist is very different and looks very interesting.
Yeah, like there's also another like just element that I thought about also when it comes to the rotation, that it sets you up with a lot of kind of potential energy for unwinding and creating momentum. And I mean, the most obvious reference for that is, of course, like power moves from breaking. That's what they do. You twist the hips so that you're ready to initiate loads of force, and then you unwind and you kick, and that gives you like a ton of force to rotate with. And I mean, like you could also do this in kind of more quote unquote pure hand balancing movements too, where you spiral the legs around and then you follow the momentum and you just walk in a circle, for example. Can be like done on blocks or on canes or just on the floor or wherever, but it allows for like a different type of control and dynamic, which I think is really relevant and very often overlooked when it comes to kind of just a regular 2-arm game, which is kept so linear for so long. And I think that the earlier someone can start messing around with the rotational axis with some degree of control and understanding, the better, in a sense, because it is a large part of what is going to inevitably happen with your body as you go into more advanced territories. And if you just don't have any point of reference to it, you're basically just losing out on a high or like a complicated type of control that you have to learn later anyway. So it's certainly a very important one to kind of pick up on, I think, as soon as you have like reasonable control on 2 arms.
Yeah, it's definitely it's one of those things I kind of forget about. I go through phases of playing with it and then forgetting about it. I can remember actually in circus school there was like where the fuck did we get them? I think we rolled them out of the cleaning closet, but we had some kind of pads, some kind of like dishcloth kind of thing on the hands, and we were like twisting and trying to get onto the heel of the hands and then doing twist steps. So if people are familiar with the step called the grapevine, you'd find it in athletics where you're kind of like crossing over yourself and then crossing over and crossing over. It's the same idea where like we're trying to twist up until we got all the way to the point that the arms crossed, let go of one and spring that round. So you're changing the handstand. So it's like walking in a circle, but you're generating a twist and a spiral to the point your arms can't go further, or the point your head gets caught between your arms. Then let go of one arm and hope that you can kind of maintain the one arm. It's like, it's not a one arm balance. You're kind of just like surviving on one arm while the other arm flings around the side. So that was kind of interesting because you'd hold the dishcloths in your hands to try get a slip on the floor that would allow this to happen.
It sounds a bit like 90s from breaking.
Yeah.
Like though there you of course set up to specifically spin. But yeah, like it's exactly the same kind of like rotational dynamic there. And like I think once you start understanding like how this dimension works, like it's interesting to see what the legs start doing when people like start learning to rotate the hips, because at first, like the first cue that I usually do for that is like, okay, you're going to try to draw a large circle with your legs around in space, and like then that will be very dependent on the person's leg flexibility. But as you draw around, like for someone who's quite new with it, even though they have good control in other movements on the hands, like that circle will be kind of jagged and choppy because they won't have the sensation of pulling the legs in this like outermost part of the circle. It'll kind of go like, it'll rotate a bit and then it'll kind of take a shortcut. So you're essentially creating some sort of elliptical shape in the air with your legs rather than like sort of a full circle. And after you get more control, you'll be able to kind of move that more smoothly. And that's when you can start feeling like momentum in your legs, which will start pulling on the rest of the body, and that's where I think there is an interesting kind of control that comes in, because you can wind yourself up and you can kick with the legs a little bit, so you get some like kind of whoosh and momentum in the legs, and then you need to stop it, and that action of stopping it, when you're literally setting yourself up for chaos, and you don't exactly know where you'll end up or what you'll have to do, because you unleash that force and then you just like go for, like, okay, I need to somehow control it here and handle it. I think that is like it's an interesting type of proprioceptive control, where, because it's quite hard in handstand to say, okay, I'm going to let go of balance and then recatch it, because the letting go, when you let go, whereas when you fling a leg, you can't be exactly sure how much force there's going to be in it.
Baseball bat leg and hold on and start going. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I was going to say, it's sort of taken into another direction, but one of the things I've been using with my more advanced people is rotating into shapes. And a simple example of this, the one I've been using, a few people have been sort of revising a skill set with certain people at the moment. You'll know who you are. We've been dealing with rotating from a handstand into a Mexican, and these kind of shapes. And the goal would be we're also kind of, some of them are pushing it all the way from like a pike hover, go sideways, twist into a kind of side pike kind of shape. Then you've got the goal in trying to get them is keep the legs as low as possible. So a lot of movement is coming from the waist, but then the hips have to react as well. And it's kind of forcing. There's an interesting moment I really enjoyed aesthetically, where they are in the side flag pike. So it's kind of like the takeoff position from a one-arm press. And then you reach the limit of what the side bend and the back arch can happen. And the top leg just kind of flops over. It's just got like this kind of, I don't know, some people, if their legs are kind of loose, it's like a 1 meter long black dildo flopping over, that kind of thing. It's got a very like, that idea to it.
Okay, I was definitely not expecting that.
It's got that.
Okay, fair enough. Let me have a new metaphor.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Ahead of the game.
What's that movie? Beat him to death with a dildo.
Oh, isn't that Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels?
Lock, Stock. Yeah, when he's flopping the thing around, it's got that kind of like funk idea to it.
Yeah, is that Vinnie Jones that does it?
I'm not sure it was Vinnie Jones, or was it not the bookkeeper guy?
Might be. It's a long time since I saw it, and I always mix it up with Snatch.
No, that was Snatch. The bookkeeping was Snatch. It was the guy who was the English side of the American partner in Lock, Stock.
Because like the guy that plays Bricktop, he's also in that, isn't he?
He's in it, yeah, but he's not a...
He's not a bad guy there, maybe.
Yeah.
Can't remember.
He's in the movie. It's kind of, they use a lot of the actors in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember. If you haven't seen Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, I mean, yeah, if you like kind of, how can you put them, quite trashy action comedies, then go for it.
Yeah.
Very British.
Yeah. So anyway, dildo leg happens in this transition. Flunk, just kind of flops out. And it's kind of funny because it's just like, it is really forced. There's just a very rubbery movement to it. Well, it's kind of like, just kind of, and then if it's done right, then they're in the Mexican, in a straddled Mexican. Then the next stage is to like come into this twisted Mexican, and the top leg kind of, this one doesn't dildo over, it helicopters over.
Yeah, it goes more like a flaggy kind of thing.
So there's kind of like, there's just some really nice movements in this kind of basically taking a press. Like if you think of the initial point of this is you take off from a press, and instead of going straight up, you go into rotation and see what happens.
Yeah. Like in breaking, they call that move the around the world. It doesn't really have a name in hand balancing. I know a couple of people that do it super well. Andrei Kaskov, he performed that. He does it possibly the best I've ever seen. But I've also seen a version of the same move, except it starts in full planche, and then I've seen it full planche, full flag, Mexican, full flag, full planche, and I've also seen full planche kind of flag into contortion handstand and around. So I mean, obviously, you need a back to be able to do this. I was practicing it for a while, and I could do it. It's just like whenever I get to Mexican, I just ruin the entire thing because like flags were nice, the pike was nice, and then it's like, what the fuck is that? And then nice flag, nice pike, nice flag. What the fuck is that? So it never kind
nice
of
flag, nice pike, Canadian,
yeah.
nice flag.
Yeah, it was like Toronto handstand. It wasn't pretty. But yeah, there's certainly like loads of twist involved in that movement, and just the fact that you're going on the outer axis, you're letting the legs lead kind of a long trajectory, whereas in most hand balancing related things you go short trajectory, you control from hands and shoulders.
But it's kind of just interesting thing you just put there, just to sort of cycle and expand on something. So there's an idea in dance, I suppose, and general movement things, the idea of the point of contact or the point of focus. And what you get is, it's like you pick a point of your body and that leads the motion and everything has to follow that, like it's being dragged around by it. So it's kind of one of those things in hand balance. A lot of the time we're very focused on our center. We're placing our center and that's everything else kind of reacts above that. But a lot of these kind of twisty shapes and other stuff, we can put the point of focus or the point of contact into somewhere else, into the knee, and that pulls the movement around. Oh, you know, it's in the foot, and the foot is like the outermost point, and everything else is following the foot rather than the center. That kind of makes them, or it's like the shoulders are like, oh, shoulders are going now, everything else has to react to it. And it's kind of interesting because it kind of breaks what we normally do in training into something else.
Yeah, and then of course, like as we talked about before, in terms of it being both an opportunity and an issue, and the issue is obviously like the issue isn't really there on two arms because, like, yes, you might experience that you rotate out as you fall, but the rotation will usually be caused by like it's a consequence of you bailing out, you letting go of the balance and then going over, for example. And I mean, it usually happens as part of kind of a cartwheeling sort of motion out of a two-arm handstand, but the fall itself will be rather linear. But on one arm, like the twisting is basically your entire life and your entire sort of nemesis. And like both when you can do it, but much more, of course, when you can't do it yet, you will always twist out. And like I remember very early when I was learning hand balancing, like because I was already theorizing a lot and trying to analyze and dissect and like all of that, I was thinking that because as you do when you're learning, I was falling over to overbalance occasionally when I was learning one. And like overbalance, falling over it becomes very rare when you're very well placed and you know your body upside down. But I noticed that whenever I got like a lot of weight in a certain point of the hand and I wasn't able to respond appropriately, I would feel my hips spin and kind of twist out of place. And I was always thinking that like if that this rotation was the one arm equivalent of arching in a sense, like it doesn't translate fully this kind of comparison, but it's similar in the sense that like if you have one point of contact on the floor and you send energy in a certain direction, like you have your legs open, like let's say in the straddle, and you send energy in a certain direction, the likelihood that both of your legs will move at the exact same pace, the exact same trajectory is very low. Like what will likely happen is that one of them will start like to move further than the other, and then very often causing that to start rotating. So a lot of the stuff that is overbalance.
Yeah. I think, sorry, I just lost you there briefly for a second, but let me throw into my own thoughts, then we'll pick back up. So basically, what I always think about on twisting, one of these main causes of it is it's to do with shoulder placement. Like, this is the thing, it's always a ripple up effect with the shoulders for most of the time with the one arm. But one of the things I spotted, and I've been coaching people away from now, is people have this idea that we have this idea of a radiation, that once you can start contracting something, you want to push hard, you will push harder and things will fire off if you intend to do something. And one of the causes is it pushes people, basically, you push up, but you don't actually notice you're not just pushing up, you're also pushing back. You're pushing the shoulder into too open, because that's when it feels like it's contracting harder. Once you start pushing the shoulder up and back, something on that side of the body is shortening on the back, but something on the other side isn't. So then we're getting this arch that travels up. It's very subtle, but the second you take the hand off, if you pushed up and too open, then suddenly shoulder's gone forward, hip goes back from the other side, the diagonal opposite side. Rotation begins to happen almost immediately. And this is the cause when there's almost two different rotations on the one arm. There's one where you lose the shape into rotation. There's one where the top leg comes over the top. And one of the interesting things I've been cueing people on this one is to correct it from the top down. And what I mean by this is, it's also like, if we look at how we set up, particularly if we're trying to use our flexibility in a one arm, we're trying to go, okay, legs apart, we're pulling with our glutes pretty hard to get our split for most cases. No one is really tensioning the front of the line as well, which is the short adductors and the inner thighs. So there's kind of no balance of forces going on. So when I engage my shoulder, it connects to the opposite glute. If we're familiar with this connection from physiotherapy, if there's a problem with the shoulder, look at the opposite glute, yada, yada, and vice versa. So this kind of kicks off this connection, this X kind of connection and spiral connection of the body. And this just generates the rotation almost immediately, unless there either is the shoulder is placed correctly and pushing straight vertical, or you have at the same time this containment of the top leg is counter rotating. And that's kind of one of those things that gets missed a little, that if you're quite tight and you're really pulling with your glutes to get as big a split as you can, once you get to the end, push inwards with your adductors, and this will actually give some tension to actually counter rotate against.
Yeah, it's like, because what happens when the kind of top leg goes over, which is the most common rotational issue, you need to, like you say, like, because it does have to do with shoulder position, it does have to do with, it's a consequence of something going wrong further down. But then again, if you're not ready to do something about it, and like the leg constantly just flops over, like adding tension in the opposite direction is certainly something to try to do, because what you want to do is you simply want to keep the leg in that externally rotated position. And like like very often in the setup of the one arm too, when doing kind of the flaggy motion, like the shoulder won't be fully stable as you set up. You start shifting over, shoulder isn't fully stable, legs start doing funky stuff due to that. And I think one of the tricky things when it comes to this type of cueing is that, yes, it is about shoulder position, and you need to fix your shoulder position by keeping the pressure through it and like sensing where you need to be in your hand and so on. But the most tangible point you have to concentrate on in that moment is likely your leg. Get the leg back under control. And this is where it becomes kind of counterintuitive, because if you, like, I've seen countless people just say, oh yeah, your legs are rotating. And then again, they come with either like the tense your abs or kind of like control your midsection thing, which, yes, it makes sense in practice to get your legs under control, but we need to understand that like the main consequence happens because you were not able to stabilize your center of mass over your base of support, and then you are traveling somewhere. You need to grab that leg, you need to put it back where it needs to be, at the same time as you're controlling, getting your shoulder back into place and keeping your balance. So when I say all these things, they do sound very confusing, and it's because it is. It is very confusing, and this is how it is to learn one arm. Like, you're trying to just understand whatever the fuck it means, what I just said now. And as I said this, I was thinking back to today when I was doing some kick-ups on one cane, and I was experiencing twisting, and I usually do when I kick up on one cane. Like, there's going to be stuff that happens, and you handle those things rather quickly, like bam, 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 okay, they're fixed on the way up. But they happen. And when I think about how I fix them, like, there's nothing I can say because it goes too fast. It has become ingrained. And
yeah, a lot of the corrections, sorry to cut over you, but I think a lot of the corrections happen. We can't, like, this is the thing, we can't teach you a perfect one arm, but we can teach you a lot of the constraints that make a perfect one arm come from it. And this is what's kind of happening in twisting. Is like, oh, we give you some of the things to work with, or some concepts. Like, say, when I'm talking about the top leg compressing downwards, we're generating a compressive force along the front line of the body, so the front of the shoulder has something to compress against to lock the shoulder from going too open. So there's a lot more going on in this than, I suppose we broke down every single chain and every single thing that happens in the twisting, we could probably figure it out. Like, it only just clicked with me there. It was like, oh, we're actually compressing on a diagonal there, and that's what keeps the body from opening into rotation.
Mm.
So
yeah, there is, and like, I mean, it says itself. I mean, I don't know much about physics, but I understand that circles are rather complicated things in terms of all of the stuff that can happen with them. And like, you have, like, you are balancing a circle, and you are handling all of these various angles, and the only way you can is by teaching, like, putting your nervous system in the context where it can start to handle this shit. And I mean, I said this on another podcast before, but I'll repeat it again just for the experience of sensing the speed of which you control rotation. And it is doing, like, stand on one leg, have your arms spread apart, like you're standing on one leg, the leg you're not standing on is kind of a little bit away from the leg you stand on. Your arms are apart, and then you close your eyes. Very simple. You can still stay there. There's no big deal. But notice how much faster your foot blade is working to keep you under control. Just sense the movements that happen in the ball of your toes, the heel, and kind of the entire ankle adjusting back and forth. And then from that position, you gather your arms above your head. You raise your center of mass, and you decrease the rotational axis so that it becomes like your lever is very short. And you will sense that your foot blade is working even faster to handle all of the stuff that happens per second. And so many of these are rotational. They're like, if you stand in that, like, again, if you do the same, you stand in that position, you balance for a bit, and then you stop balancing, there's very low chance that you'll fall exactly backwards or exactly forwards. You will likely start to rotate at some joint in your body.
Yeah, I just had another realization about rotating and twisting on the thing. So you can think of twisting on the one arm, when you're losing it, it's almost like a hurricane or a tornado, that the point of contact at the ground is very small, but as you go up higher, you get bigger amount of deflection and a bigger effect, I suppose.
Yep.
So that's what that's kind of interesting. I never really thought about it that way. So I was like, oh, I'm twisting, it gathers kind of momentum or torque, I suppose, as it goes through the shape, and that's what flings your leg over the top or flings you out.
And again, very, very applicable in the scenario of standing on the foot and then gathering the arms above your head while having your eyes closed, because in that position, that is where you have the that is max hurricane, basically.
Max hurricane.
And you will feel kind of the body kind of like almost shaking back and forth to keep balance. And then it's the interesting thing also with twisting that I find fascinating, because that's a lot of the stuff that I do nowadays, or like that I've done for 10 years since I got good at hand balancing. And that is like many of the advanced shapes are twisted.
Yeah.
Like you twist into, like a figa is by definition a very twisted shape. You have even just like what I call the twist shape, which is the kind of like you rotate at the hips and kind of put your legs in this front split side of type of position. Like many of the flags, actually more than you would even think, like involve a little bit of twisting, because it allows you to kind of lock the hip more effectively above the shoulder, at least for a lot of people. One arm pressing is entirely twisting, and all of this kind of rotation of the spine, of the torso and of the shoulder, and all of this is like, it becomes very relevant, but it becomes an entirely kind of, it becomes, you put your body there, and like it doesn't matter. You're not going to start twisting more just because you're in a twisted shape, because like it is not about the body's twisting. It is about what causes you to go there. And when it is a choice, you just go, okay, I go here and I balance. I go here and I balance. And it doesn't really matter. Whereas when you lose it, even on the most advanced level, even the best hand balancer in the world, once they are too tired to be able to keep center of mass over base of support, they're like, something is going to give. And if they struggle to stay up, like it is likely going to twist in the very same way that like someone who's just learning it does.
Yeah. I'd like to segue back to some of the more advanced twisting shapes actually and give a bit more details on them, because I think they're kind of interesting. I think they're actually kind of more accessible depending on your physical capabilities than some of the other shapes people go directly for. And just as an offhand comment before we get into it, it's always this kind of interesting thing when you see what the internet dialogue is compared to the actual practices. And internet dialogue, the straight shape is the best thing ever, and you must be straight and completely straight, and this is what we're looking for, straight line. But then we tend to idolize all our people who are curvier, bendier, roundier, flexier, twistier as kind of the ultimate kind of thing. It's like, oh, so there's kind of this weird juxtaposition I always find.
Yeah, they have kind of transcended the straightness.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, oh, we're kind of looking at this kind of thing. You even see it like, what do you call him? Say, Andrei Bondarenko, as an example, he's got some nice sequences on two arms. I'm not too enamored, but he has one really nice sequence I remember where he just went up, pressed, but on the press he rotated through the body like left and right, just to give it a bit of flair. And it was just really nice, just a really nice little add-on. Whereas like, he is the ultimate straight handstand man, but just adding little kind of rotation in looked really good. But anyway, it's getting off the topic. I'd really like to just talk about, like, I find some of the twisty flags just a very interesting point to actually start training flags with people, because I find the stretch across the body locks you into position better than relying on muscular control. It kind of reduces, it kind of like winds things up like a bunch of rope and holds things into place, is the way I think about it. In particular, I'm thinking about, it's one of those things, does this flag have a name? I always just call it twist flag, where it's basically like you're doing a front split. The legs are actually, it looks like a front split, but the legs are split about 90 degrees, and the bottom leg is rotating upwards.
Yeah, I just call it twist flag too, because you just twist the hips.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting one to do on flags, because it's, in some ways, I've had a few people who were able to hold that for a decent amount of time much sooner than they're able to hold a straddle flag, even though they're flexible enough to hold a decent straddle flag. And it could just kind of like, once you like, they wouldn't be able to transition into it from a straddle one arm, but they could set it up on two arms and then take the hand off and hold it very soon after learning a one arm. And it's kind of an interesting shape that it's like, you kind of bend over, one leg starts coming over top. I'm flailing my arms around here like people are watching me. I'm just doing
I do the same. Like, you should see me and Emmet when we sit here, these fucking podcasts, and flail the arms around in the air. Like, oh yeah, 'cause you do like this, you do like that. Goddamn clown show here.
So anyway,
at least we don't have the Sauron and like Death Star backgrounds today.
yeah, so
Anyway,
don't
go
ruin this
on.
for people. Hold on, I can fix that very quickly.
Yeah, we need to fix that.
Yeah. So then you go into a straddle, into a deep side bend, as deep as you can get it. This will be different for everyone. Then when you go, it's kind of like one leg starts going down and then it goes around. And then I'm always cueing people, say like, get the thigh to your belly button or that kind of direction. And then at the same time, the other leg comes up over the top. But then there's an interesting kind of rotation that happens when you're trying to push through. And it's kind of like you're trying to show the top nipple to the ceiling is the way I'd say it. Not that you're really doing it, but you're just trying to like open the body along that, and that gets the stretch, and that locks the shape in if you can keep the shoulder in the right position. As long as it's not too open.
There is a feeling of those types of flag positions where like it sounds dumb, but like you just dump your ass on the other side of the shoulder, and then like that just counterbalances with your torso. But the fact that like there is like, I remember Sasha used to say to me that like little like skruv, he would say. Skruv in Swedish means twist, and like screw in English, like screwing something. Yeah. So that little kind of like allowing the hip flexor to kind of be open and backwards. That's how I have always kind of felt the most comfortable with my flags, by like allowing that kind of lengthening of the hip flexors backwards. So if you see like, if I do that kind of flag, I rarely do the like really twisted one like that. But like I'll usually have that kind of back leg traveling in that direction, because it makes you, it makes it easier to kind of lock on top of the shoulder compared to, I mean, it's the same thing with the full flag. It's just that the full flag takes more strength. But there are other flags that don't do that as much. For example, a tuck flag, like you have weight on the other side of the body due to the knees. So it doesn't have as much of that kind of lock sensation as the ones that are kind of more stretched out. Or kind of if you bend one leg over and like allow that kind of hip flexor kind of twisty little thing to happen in the shoulder. And this is also, I mean, like now, like this is kind of out of my physical understanding, because it won't happen in this lifetime. It's like all of those kind of contortion-y flags, the ones that just put like that literally put the butt on the shoulder kind of flags.
Yeah.
The ones that like it looks like they're bending higher up in the waist than others, like primarily ladies that do that. But I've seen some guys doing it too. But that kind you very often see correlate just with people who have very crazy back flexibility, and it kind of looks as if they're twisting into the back in kind of a contortion-y sense. So as if the backwards bending flexibility helps them into that those kinds of shapes.
It's one of those ones like if you look at those shapes from the side, it's one of those things like if you look at them from the flag angle, they look, oh, they're doing a flag. But if you look at them from a side-on angle, you can see that the back bend has kind of pushed them out into a question mark shape almost. That's kind of what's going. So it's a kind of an interesting solution to reducing the lever length required to do the flag. Then you'll see a lot of these girls who hold them as well. They also hold them with like quite an open shoulder position and quite a level shoulder. If you look at the shoulders crossed, it's not as diagonal as normal. And that kind of, it's interesting because they're kind of they have this weird pseudo vertical alignment on them. I don't know. I'm trying to translate what I see in my head into this geometry, but it's like it's still got a flag for me always kind of has a sideways and an inwards push, but these have just like a vertical push to it, even though they're very, very not vertical at all.
Yeah, like it's a very. I find those to be extremely fascinating, because I mean, you have people that can literally. Yeah, they put the ass on the shoulder and then the legs are completely vertical downwards. Of course, then we're speaking high-end extreme level contortion, which you rarely see that kind of stuff, except among kind of the best of the best. But and I mean, I I guess it's also questionable how healthy that is long term. But then again, most people that do that kind of stuff are young and in pretty damn good shape.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, like you'd really want to go to a rhythmic gymnastics club and just like abduct some of the girls and just make them learn handstands.
Yeah, but that's what a lot of them do in Eastern Europe. From what like, I mean, not necessarily rhythmic gymnastics, but it's that or sport acro.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean, I don't know those circuits over there, but it seems like those kind of communities are obviously connected due to the similarity of their practices. And yeah, they do have some pretty fucking crazy flexibility levels. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, rhythmic just kind of, there's kind of a tier on flexibility in these things, and rhythmic always just pushes it to the highest level.
Yeah.
And also just the weirdest kind of thing. So like a lot of the higher level modern vocabulary has a lot of twisting in it to facilitate a lot of the spinning. So you'd have people who'd be very twisty. I remember one girl I knew who could basically turn her torso. She could do, say, a slightly straddled forward fold, so about 90-degree split in the legs, go down and turn, so she would get a 180-degree twist through the spine.
Yeah, that stuff. I wish I could do that.
Yeah. There's some kind of cool pressing stuff that I've seen with a much lesser degree of bend than that one, of just like set up your press, rotate, put the hands on the floor, press up, and then the legs kind of come around the other way as well.
Yeah. I used to do a couple of things like that, kind of like put the hands the wrong way and then kind of rotate the press up. A friend of mine, Lisa, she does all those things like extremely well. She can also do that kind of rotation. Plus, she has those shoulders which are barely attached, so she can like twist another kind of level on top of that. But yeah, it does allow, I think, in hand balancing vocab, like some of the most extreme movements there are, like, I mean, they come a lot from that twisting. Like, I mean, pressing on one arm is entirely, if you have like a crazy rotational twist like you described there, it helps a lot. And also like the kind of the people that press from crocodile and stuff, like they basically what they do is basically get on top of their shoulder by twisting the hips to an extreme degree in from the crocodile position, and that allows them to to actually engage and get something to push with.
Yeah.
Compared to as if like you were just like lying in a crocodile and straightening your arm into like a planche, which is, I've seen it happen, but it's very rare.
Yeah, it's a very rare thing indeed. That kind of twisting off the crocodile and into the press is kind of interesting, because the only non-Chinese people I've seen do this, and with like a kind of bigger build in terms of relative to sort of Chinese acrobats, they were kind of almost twisting, like legs leading from a crocodile to generate a twist, to generate momentum and overcome the inertia, and then at the same time push the chest out the opposite direction to the legs, and then kind of roll on top of the press.
Yeah, so it's a very extra, like you need access to a lot of kind of side bending and like back bending to be able to start initiating such a movement. And yeah, like most people that I've seen do that, or basically all of them, like use that. It's interesting, like when I was training with this Chinese girl here in Stockholm a couple of times, she told me that she was doing some like exercises for some like very strange pressing stuff by grabbing onto a bar, and kind of, it was as if she was doing a one-arm press on canes, but instead of piking and lifting into a straddle L shape, she just grabbed the bar, twisted her back the other way, and then just lifted up. And she said, like, when she was younger, she could do stuff like croco press. Like, she was 32, and she's like, I mean, she's still the best hand balancer in, like, or she's probably like top 10 hand balancers in Europe almost still. She's absolute tank. But
Maybe we should be doing the podcast.
yeah, like she said, like, oh yeah, like I have pain, and yeah, I'm old, I can't do this stuff anymore. But when I was small, yeah, this way it's much easier, she said. And I was like, okay. And she explained, like, yeah, because you see, like, I put my arm like this, and then I put my butt here, shoop, and then like everything just turns in a plane of movement. Like I would be dead 4 times over if my body did that motion. Like you could get me there in like a car crash.
Don't tempt me.
Yeah, but it's quite crazy to see like what I mean, if we're discussing those kind of like extreme higher ends of rotation, they do allow a lot of stuff. And like if you look at breaking, like what a lot of like the kind of new weird moves that are coming out there's so much strange twisting of limbs and of torsos and of whatnots in there that like I don't even understand what's going on a lot of the time, and I'm used to looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
So like for me, like the spiraling rotational dimension is certainly the most interesting out of all of them, because it also kind of incorporates flexion and extension and all of that, and like it's basically rotation happens when you add kind of like several forces together. Like it will very likely end up in this rotation, and it's cool within like various kind of course in gymnastics and all that, it's all about rotational forces. In dance there's tons of it, like in contemporary dance and ballet, everywhere you kind of come back to this, like the generation of forces in circles.
Yeah, just kind of thought of something. So I think they're called fouette turns in ballet, where you're on one leg and then you're spinning around and kicking the other leg out to generate the momentum.
Yeah, when you kick it out and pull it in.
Yeah, kick it out, pull it in, kick it out, pull it in. I want to see you do that in a handstand.
I can't, because I'm shit at 90s. But you can go and watch Lil Malish do 50 rounds of 2000s. So it doesn't matter. He basically like this little.
What's the difference between a 1990 and a 2000?
So a 1990 is when you spin on one hand. Yeah. A 2000 is when you put one hand on top of the other and do it. And then you have a reverse 90, or it's also called a dead man's 90 for some reason. That's when you spin on the opposite hand. So you spin in the I did that hand. Yeah, you spin in the thumb direction. That is a reverse 90. And yeah, like I said, the 2000 is when you put one on top of the other and spin. And there is this like little Russian kid now, Lil Malish, he's called, like that's his b-boy name, and he's like 9 years old, and he broke the world record in 90s with like 30 something rounds, I think, or was it 42 or something absurd. And then I think he broke 50 rounds of 2000s. And it's interesting to see him because like he isn't unstable while he spins. Like he doesn't have that look that the others have, that like it's kind of like it's powerful, but it wobbles a bit, and in the end it goes off. Like he's just it's hand balancingly perfectly straight, and it just spins until there's not enough drive left to keep him going. And yeah, he's 9. So of course he's 9, right?
Puberty will kick in, the growth plates will fuse, and he'll have no more talent left. We know how this rolls.
No, that's the thing. Like all of like so many of the guys that are total beasts right now and like in their mid-20s, they started out like somewhat like him, like not necessarily as power move monsters, but like a lot of them, like this guy from the States, El Nino, he kept on going. When he was like, I remember him from freestyle session 3, he was doing head spins and taking off his shoes and shit. So sadly, the kids are better, and they stay better.
This is the problem with the internet. Someone needs to tell these kids these moves are really difficult and constantly reinforce, like, oh yeah, it's really difficult, really hard, to slow them down a little.
Yeah, they're just going to say, oh, fuck you, I saw it on the internet. Wait, I'm going to show you. Yeah,
everyone's clearly doing full planner spins.
Yeah, I'm going to show you because it's easy. And then, okay, shit. Yeah, you go like, yeah, right. And you come back 2 months later, it's like, oh, fuck.
Damn it. Give me your phone. Have you not got addicted to games on this yet?
To what?
Have you not got addicted to games on your phone yet, kid?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I think that's a good point to wrap it up, actually. We can abuse children for a while mentally, but they are our future. But other than that, yeah, twisting and handstand. I hope I've sort of given you some things to think about, or not. And twisting, it's not always bad.
So go and try and twist in handstand.
Yeah, basically, tag us on your twisting and see what happens. Try to.
Yeah, I want to see someone twist like really far, as far as like so far that it looks like trash, and then return to a perfectly nice controlled handstand.
You want to get like, who is that person who's doing like twist all the way down to elbow stands and twisting out of it?
I've seen a few. I've seen it with walks and without, I think.
Yeah. Give us some of that, but more jank. The jankest twist you can imagine.
Please, bring it on.
Yeah, other than that, I'm Emmett Lewis. We're here with Mikael Christiansen, and thank you for tuning in.
Cheers.
Hi, Emmett here. One thing we forgot to mention during the episode is that we have recently just updated our Push Harder program. One of the things we've included in it is a big tutorial on how shoulder position affects the one-arm handstand and all the various mistakes you might make of either twisting, falling out, not high enough, all these kind of mistakes and the things. So it's quite a detailed tutorial. On top of that, we've added another couple of exercises based on your feedback. And we've also expanded the manual we doubled the length of the manual, actually, not even expanded it. It's now twice the length it was before. So there's a lot more information. If twisting is a problem for you in the one-arm handstand, we have the solution to it in that program. Other than that, thanks for supporting us, and speak to you next week.
The Handstandcast is brought to you by Handstand Factory and is produced by Motion Impulse. Thanks for tuning in. You can find a full transcript of each episode along with the show notes and any relevant references on handstandfactory.com/podcast. Thanks to Isaac for editing and Jordan for transcriptions. Music by Daniel Horwath. If you want to support the show, you can buy us a coffee on buymeacoffee.com or consider starting one of our Handstand Factory online programs. Links are in the show notes.